This Saturday only, Old Navy's famous flip-flops are $1. Plus, get free flip-flops when you spend $24 or more in-store or online. Saturday only at Old Navy and OldNavy.com. Valid 6/15, solid color only, limit 10 in stores, 5 online, free offer valid before noon PST.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Source Material Podcast, coming at you with episode, oh my goodness, 220. See, I always get there and I forget. I have to go to Google Docs just to even look it up. I think a 225 was our Godzilla one. So that means, yep, this is episode 226. And we are getting ready for a recent theatrical release. Oh, and I don't even know what the movie's titled.
It's
but
called
here,
Dark Phoenix, I think.
I was going to say, here to let us know, the man who most likely would have an idea as what it's called, Chris Armstrong. Unspoken Decades, Chris Armstrong. So I'm trying to enunciate your name, Chris Armstrong. There we go. So yeah, it's called Dark Phoenix.
Yeah,
okay.
And it's not like, as far as the movie posters, and it's not even called X-Men Dark Phoenix.
Really?
I did notice that on some of the TV spots I saw over the weekend, they were saying X-Men Dark Phoenix at the end, like to just make sure everybody knows, I guess, this is an X-Men movie. But the title itself is just Dark Phoenix, apparently.
Huh. Here's the thing. I think I watched some of, speaking of these films and this franchise, I think I watched some of First Class.
Yeah.
I don't think I even finished that. And then after that was
Days of Future Past.
Days of Future Past was after that.
And then Apocalypse.
Okay, I was getting those two confused. Okay, so yeah, I watched all of Days of Future Past, and then I think it was last year, maybe the year before, I actually sat down and watched all of the Age of Apocalypse. And it's kind of sad that, you know, this iteration of the franchise is it's definitely
it's kind of going out in a whimper.
Yeah, and I know Mark would know a lot more than I would about the history of what's going on with Dark Phoenix. I know that there were a lot of problems with it from what I understand. But anyway, it's finally getting released. This all came in, you know, the midst of the whole. It was Disney buying these properties,
Disney
right?
Fox, yeah.
So,
which I think Dark Phoenix initially was supposed to be released last year. I'm not 100% sure when it was. I know New Mutants has been pushed back like 6 different times.
Yeah.
But I think even Dark Phoenix was originally slated to be released either last summer or last winter.
Okay.
And they got pushed back to this summer.
This is the second time they've kind of tried to put the Phoenix Saga of some sorts in the X-Men film franchise. The first time being one of the
Last Stand.
Yep,
it was the third X-Men movie,
and it was that's supposedly the worst. And
yeah, I'd say it is.
Yeah, I would probably agree. It's been a while since I'd watched it, but I remember some of the. Was that I'm the Juggernaut bitch?
That was included.
Oh
yes. Boy. You know, everybody hates that. I had seen that video just like for the first time, like maybe a month before the movie came out.
Yeah.
You know, the internet video of the animated series and the dubbed over, which is very funny. So when they put that in the movie, I liked it. I thought it was funny. I mean, the movie wasn't great anyway, so that certainly didn't ruin it.
No, yeah.
But yeah, everybody hates that, and it's fine, whatever. It's kind of sad. Like Spider-Man kind of came along a couple years later and kind of blew up the comic book movie thing. Blade had come out a couple years before X-Men, but X-Men was really the first like comic book movie since really like the first Batman.
Oh yeah,
it was like a huge deal. It's not like there's a lot of stuff you can say about that first X-Men movie that is dated as far as special effects, and like they're not super true to the X-Men mythology or whatever. But like as a super nerdy comic book nerd watching a superhero movie, that was like Nirvana when that movie came out.
Dude, let's
seeing Wolverine on the big screen, even though he wasn't quite the same Wolverine you're used to, like. It was amazing. And like the franchise is just really, it's been really up and down. There's like Days of Future Past is really good.
Yeah, I like that one.
Apocalypse isn't very good. The Last Stand's really bad. I don't think any of the Wolverine movies are all that good, except maybe Logan, which people like more than me, it seems like. I do like it, but the other two Wolverine movies are pretty bad.
We're talking about the X-Men film. That came out in what, 2000?
2000, yeah.
Okay. Was there a superhero team film from the big two
There
prior
has never been one, I don't believe. Other than the, Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie, which doesn't really count.
Can't count that. Yeah, that really didn't get seen by too many people. And I'm talking big two. I don't think Mystery Men was... I don't think that
was 99, and that I don't think Mystery Men I don't have a lot of knowledge of this. I think that the characters from Mystery Men are all combo characters, but I don't think that they were a team.
Loosely based on Burton's Flaming Carrot comics. So, yeah, okay, all right.
And I love Mystery Men, by the way.
It's a good one. It is a good one. Yeah, I don't think there was too many. Are we going to count the teenage? Well, again, I'm looking at Big Two. Can't count TMNT. Right. So.
Yeah, that's a different thing, really.
Yep. So, yeah, the X-Men came on the scene there in the film industry, and I remember watching it and being extremely excited, being able to see. Dude, it was just coming out of the 90s, and what was one of the hottest comic books at the time. Me and you've been talking about this every time we've been together. We talked about Fatal Attractions. We talked about Blood Ties. Now we're going to jump back into the 80s. I think
this is our third huge X-Men crossover story of the year.
Back into actually January through October of 1980 is what we're looking at. This is the book that this film is going to be based on, Dark Phoenix. This is the Dark Phoenix Saga. So the actual movie, Dark Phoenix, comes out, I had assumed this Friday, because usually Mark's got us doing it right.
Come out last Friday when this goes
out. Time travel. Friday the 7th of June, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there we go. So, yeah. All right. So we're going to look at the source material that the movie is based upon here. I was just telling Chris before we got on here that I don't think I've actually sat down and read this. And this is by far one of the most, I would say, important X-Men stories. The creative team on this, which was Chris Claremont, John Byrne, art by John Byrne. So Claremont writes a story about Jean Grey, and this is back in the early 100s of this title. Just to kind of give you a brief summary of what occurs prior to this, the X-Men are.
I was going to look that up and I didn't get a chance. So fill me in. Issues 106 through 108, I think, or 107 through 109.
According to the wiki, it has it listed as 101 through 108. Now, I didn't read it, but I can tell you that I've watched quite a few YouTube videos right before this show just to kind of get a. But from what I understand, there's the X-Men are crashing in this ship or the shuttle or whatever. Okay, how many of those have we talked about? I know of one already that the same situation happened. And what's funny is, come to think of it, it referenced Dark Phoenix, or at least referenced the Phoenix Saga when we were talking Fatal Attractions. Wolverine grabbed Jean Grey's hand and didn't let her fall out of the plane. I don't know if you remember that or not. But anyway, so the plane's going down, the ship's going down, and there's this solar flare that hits it. And in order to stop her team from getting irradiated by this solar flare, she throws up this huge telekinetic shield. While it saves her team, it really messes her up, from what I understand. Now, at some point, she is crying out psychically, just for any help that she can to save her team and save herself. The thing that answers that call is the intergalactic, that's the word I'm looking for, the intergalactic being, the Phoenix, which is this massive, I don't know what the best way to describe it is like this massive amount of psionic energy. Psionic there, Chris Armstrong.
Yeah. Catch on.
Yeah, sir. But it's this massive, it's this massive being made up with just extreme power, and it somehow helps her save the team, and also at the same time bonds with Jean Grey, causing her to become quite powerful. And at some point, I don't know if it's shortly after that, she straight up changes her name to Phoenix. So there you go. That's kind of how the Phoenix and Jean Grey come together. Now, as time unfolds, that's 101 through 108. There are things that make specifically Cyclops, but the X-Men start to see that she is a lot more powerful than she was. A lot more powerful than she was. And she's doing things that just make, specifically in these issues that we're looking at, Cyclops is still raising eyebrows. He's like, whoa, wait a second. She's off the chain. She's definitely way more powerful than I thought she was. And then we get into the beginning of this saga. So before we get into that, I want to ask you real quick. I know I said I've never read this before. Mm-hmm. So Chris, have you read this prior to reading it?
Yeah, I had read it once, and it was either around the time of my senior year in high school, so 20 years ago, or maybe like right after I got out of high school. And funnily enough, I had borrowed the trade paperback from a friend of mine, and when I had trouble coming up with a copy to read for the podcast, I had to go back to the same guy. He still had the same copy, so I reread the same. I remember reading it 20 years ago or whatever and being a little underwhelmed because it was such a huge, landmark X-Men storyline. And I think I just wasn't prepared for like the dated storytelling style of like early 80s comics. I still liked it then even, but I was like, it was a little less impressive than I thought. I actually enjoyed it more reading it, I think, this time than I did last time I read it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked about Claremont being he could write.
Yeah, he's a wordy, which he's always, I guess, kind of been known for. Even in like the late 90s, early 2000s, when he was still doing stuff at Marvel, reading articles in like Wizard magazine and stuff like that, I would always see references to how like dense his material usually was.
Really? Well, so Claremont and the X-Men, my goodness, I think he helmed this series for, I want to say, over 20 years. I'm looking on the wiki here just to see if we can have a good idea of when he started. So, who recognized Claremont's enthusiasm for the new X-Men that Ween and Dave Cockrum had created in 1975, hired Claremont to take over the series as of issue 94. So, issue 94, Chris Claremont takes over the X-Men in May of 1975. At this time, when this story is going on, he's got 5 years of writing the X-Men under his belt. And he, I'm sure, has started setting things up way earlier in
That's
this
something
series.
You could do back then. Like, you don't have, you rarely have guys stay on a book for 3 or 4 years even, much less 10 years, So, if they plant seeds in the early issues, you're going to see those come to fruition within a year or so most of the time. I believe he was on it up through the launch of X-Men with Jim Lee, which would have been 91. And I think he did the first few issues of that, and then he left early in that run.
Okay. All right. So 75.
But he has come back and done other X-Men books since that time. He's done a lot more even since he left initially.
He's the one that wrote the crossover for X-Men Teen Titans. I want to say.
So yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I think him and Walt Simonson.
I'll double check that to make sure I'm right. But yeah,
it might have been Claremont and Wolfman together. I haven't read that. I don't really know that for certain, but
well, 75 to 90. You said 91, so that's what, 16 years. Okay, yeah. So maybe I was off.
Heck of a run though.
Yeah, it is, dude. Just like you said, 10 years on a title is actually really crazy. He had his hand in this. Like I said, we're 5 years into it, and then we got the Dark Phoenix happen. Any burning desires before I hop into this?
Now let's do it.
All right, here we go. So issues 129 through 131. So at the beginning of issue 129, the X-Men are getting their bearings as it seems like Xavier's been gone for a while or something. I noticed that they made a point to kind of say that, Cyclops was kind of trying to get used to Xavier being there, and Xavier's coming back in as this headmaster role, and Cyclops is like, man, he doesn't understand that we've kind of grown up a little bit since we've
been without you for a while.
Yeah. Xavier comes back as their leader, and we find out shortly in the issue that Cerebro, the mutant detecting device that they have there, has discovered 2 new mutants that are apparently out there, I assume in New York, both in New York. I can't remember what the map said, but either way, there's 2 new mutants that are out there that have some very interesting powers.
Kitty's in Chicago.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and what we find out is by the end of issue 129, the first one that they find is Kitty Pryde. Is it first Shadowcat? Is that her first code name?
I believe so.
Okay. I don't think she becomes part of the team at all throughout this.
No, this is just kind of her introduction, and she helps them out, but yeah, she's not an X-Man for a while, I don't think.
And she's just discovering her powers. You know, she's able to phase through, basically, at one point, she's like standing and falls through a wall, and then she'll fall through a floor and go down to the bottom floor. So she's just starting to figure out her powers. And Xavier and the X-Men do their thing where they show up and try to talk to her parents and kind of maybe try to woo her to coming in, or allow her to come to the school. Storm, Wolverine, and Colossus are out talking to her. Well, I think there's another team that gets sent to find the other mutant that's apparently in, I think, Lower Manhattan. But while they're out talking to Kitty, Storm, Wolverine, and Colossus get captured by the White Queen. That's right. Emma Frost of the Hellfire Club shows up, captures all three of them. But Kitty Pryde, you know, actually feeling, you know, she likes these people that came and talked to her about, you know, coming to the school. So she follows Emma Frost, and that's kind of where we leave things off. She follows Emma Frost and finds out where the X-Men are being held, or these three X-Men are being held. Now, 130, we catch up, issue 130, we catch up with our other team, and the title of this, and this iconic cover too, the debut of the Dazzler. Nightcrawler, Jean Grey, and Scott Summers head to a disco in Lower Manhattan. In this issue, they find the other mutant, and it turns out to be Dazzler. There's more Hellfire Club hijinks as the three are attacked at this disco by the Hellfire Club. Dazzler helps them out, and they actually are able to defeat the Hellfire Club here. So, and then in issue 131, the Nightcrawler, Jean Grey, and Scott Summers find Kitty Pryde. Apparently, Kitty's being hunted by the Hellfire Club or something along the line. She's being chased by him. Jean Grey, as Phoenix, seems to be getting more powerful. One of the things I remember in this issue is she shows up. This car is just about to hit Kitty, like run her down. Phoenix just kind of steps in front of it and just crumples the car, just like we see in the movies. You know, the car goes flying up into the air, and Scott sees this and he's like, "Oh man, you know, it seems to be getting more powerful by the day." Now, Kitty tells our three X-Men here that's about Storm, Wolverine, and Colossus being captured, and they all decide to plan a rescue mission. And I can't remember if it's this one or if it's the previous issue, but when Colossus goes and meets Kitty Pryde, there is just like a one-liner that's kind of thrown in there. It makes you think. Now, Kitty's 13 and a half, by the way. That's stated, I think, 3 or 4 times. I have no idea how old Colossus is, but she almost says something that makes you think, now that we know all this history before, or that takes place after, but she almost says something that sounds like, you know, she's like, "Hey, check that dude out."
Yeah, she's impressed.
Yeah. And now in issue 131, we get, as they go and do the rescue mission, we have Phoenix versus the White Queen. So, yes, Jean Grey versus Emma Frost. And Emma barely escapes, but the X-Men are safe, so they're able to rescue the ones that were captured. And when they take Kitty Pryde back, now see, there's some things here that happen throughout these issues where you're like, okay, Jean Grey is kind of skirting that line of like, you know, she's kind of doing some stuff that she probably wouldn't have done in the past. You know, she's been, you know, she's been a hero, and usually she doesn't use her powers for, I don't know, for her own gain. But when they take Kitty Pryde back to her family, her dad is like uber pissed. He is mad. All of a sudden, as he's yelling at Charles Xavier, he changes his tone immediately. And Cyclops is like, "Whoa, I've never seen Professor X use his powers to do that to somebody." And what we find out is Jean lets him know. He's like, "No, that was her."
Yeah.
So anyway, so there's your first 3 issues. What are your thoughts here? What do you got to say?
I guess this is the introduction to the Hellfire Club, which I have never really read much. I mean, obviously Emma Frost has been a big part of X-Men continuity for years now.
Yeah.
But this might be the only storyline I've read with the Hellfire Club being like the main antagonist. And it was a nice, like, smaller scale group for them to deal with, especially when on the back end of this storyline, it's the Phoenix. Like, it's this huge cosmic level event. But also shout out to the crash test dummy masks that the Hellfire Club henchmen wear. I'm not sure if the crash test dummies were a thing yet. I don't think they were.
No, they weren't.
That's what they look like.
Yes, they do.
It is interesting that, like, in this era, 2 mutants popping up on Cerebro is like a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Because there just aren't that many mutants. And within 15 years from this, there are mutants everywhere. It's like innumerable. And it got to the point where they were kind of out of control. Marvel kind of walked that back some with the No More Mutants thing, in House of M. But it got to a point around that time where, like, it was like being a mutant wasn't that special almost, it seemed like, because there were just so many.
Mm-hmm.
But back in these days, 2 mutants popping up at the same time was like almost like a crisis level event. Like, we've got to hurry up and get to these 2 quickly. We'll split up. Yeah. You pointed out on Facebook Wolverine checking out Penthouse, which seems kind of risque for like a comic aimed at children. It's not Playboy. It's like, it's the hard stuff.
It's Penthouse, dude.
Yeah, I guess this was around the era of Deep Throat and like, porn was becoming mainstream for a while, in the late 70s. Maybe that had something to do with it, but
it's another one of those things where it's not for kids anymore, or at least it's not. It's kind of skewing towards the more adult stories,
right.
something that they can tell an adult.
Yeah, and most kids probably didn't know what that was, if they were, under, 12 or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, I found it interesting that, like, they take on some armored goons, and they give them a good fight. Like, this is the time when, like, the X-Men weren't so super powerful that, like, a couple of guys in knockoff Iron Man suits could, give them a run for their money. That's one of the things that I think is kind of watered down comic book storytelling in time since then, is like everyone's got to be so super powerful. Like, and we see a lot of examples in this storyline of, like, Wolverine, if he was set ablaze, falling from an airplane as he did in the Civil War storyline a few years ago.
I cannot
he was basically melted down to a skeleton, but his body heals itself before he even hits the ground. And it's like, I mean, is he just a god?
That is ridiculous. That is the one thing I've taken away from that story. I mean, yes, Civil War was a great premise, but then I saw stuff like that and I was like, oh, geez, come on.
Yeah, I guess that's all in like the first. I took some notes, which I normally haven't been doing, but I did for this one. When they show up to get Check Dazzler out, like, she displays a lot of power for what is a character that's kind of become a joke. I guess because of the disco element, she just has light powers basically, but like, she's a force to be reckoned with in this first appearance.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you thought of her. The most I remember about Dazzler, and really, honestly, I don't think I've ever read anything where she was so immensely effective and such a threat that you can take her seriously. Yeah. The only other storyline that I can remember Dazzler being in where I thought, oh, hey, who is this girl? That was Inferno when that storyline was going on. But I never, I never understood how. I didn't understand the concept of, like, okay, I'm blinded by the light. All right, so that's about what? All there. What else? Okay, I guess I can't see. So, but I never understood. But hey, this is Dazzler, for Pete's sake. She is a rather important member of the X-Men, especially being found this early. We're in the 1980s. But I can't remember much else of her. It's neat to be actually. It's funny that they call this the Dark Phoenix Saga, and as to why they threw these issues in here, the only thing I can think of is because this is like where the Hellfire Club starts to ramp up their stuff. It just so happens we also find Kitty Pryde in X-Men 129, and then Dazzler in X-Men 130.
Yeah.
Two very
a lot of big things happening.
Yeah, two very prominent female members of the X-Men. So,
plus, the Dark Phoenix stuff is really just the last 3 issues. So calling something a saga that's only 3 issues maybe doesn't quite cover it.
we gotta fill this out a little bit, do a little something with it. I'll never forget when I first read Days of Future Past, and I was like, people will talk about this all the time. I'm like, sweet, I'm gonna go find the trade. So I find the trade, and it's 2 issues.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a second. I thought this was going to be some kind of awesome big cross-time storyline, and it was 2 issues long. So
you can barely find any story that's 2 issues long in any comic anymore.
No kidding, dude.
The minimum is 3.
It's true.
But, in the 80s, you could have a huge landmark event, and it's only 2 issues. I've become fairly jaded about current state of Marvel and DC the last year or so.
It's tough. It's tough. Not. I mean, dude, you're obviously not alone. I've talked to so many people and listened to so many podcasts of people who just it's. You long for those glory days of what comics were. Well, let's hop into 132 through 134. So Dazzler has gone off and is back to doing her own thing. Apparently, she's just I don't think they've officially made her a member of the X-Men, but I think she'll help out if the time is ever comes. And Kitty is back with her family, so we're still back to our core X-Men that we started with here. The X-Men visit an old teammate in Angel. That's right, Warren Worthington III. He's apparently not been a member of the X-Men for a while. I think that they believe they're going to talk to him about the Hellfire Club. And it turns out at one point he was a member, didn't really like the way things went down. So they're going to use his knowledge about that to kind of figure out, maybe plan a visit to the Hellfire Club. Just figure out what the heck's going on here, why they're causing so much trouble. Let's stop real quick, Chris, and talk about the Hellfire Club, okay? All right. So, like I said, the Hellfire Club is kind of ramping up their, specifically one guy in particular, a guy by the name of Jason Wingard, who actually happens to be this master of illusion by the name of, is it Mastermind?
Right.
Mastermind. And he has taken a liking to Jean Grey. And I'm certain that there have been issues prior to this that they've been setting this stuff up. But he is getting into her head and making her think that she was living in a past life. She was in love with Jason. And as weird as that all is, it's a ploy that he is trying to, number one, make her fall in love with him. And number two, he is trying to make a play at the head of the Hellfire Club. Mm-hmm. He isn't the head. The head is Sebastian Shaw, I believe. So he's trying to make a play for that, for whatever power the head of the Hellfire Club will give you. That's what Jason Wingard or Mastermind's trying to do by making Jean Grey his Black Queen. So we have Emma Frost, this psychic telekinetic, whatever. She's obviously got these mind powers. Well, yeah. Jason Wingard's going to use Jean Grey to be the Black Queen and, use her to take power in some way. So here we go. All right, let's talk about the Hellfire Club. Sebastian Shaw. I pulled him up on the wiki here. Sebastian Shaw, like I said, at this time, head of the Hellfire Club. His abilities, according to this, he is able to absorb various types of pure energy to further enhance his physical attributes and healing prowess. He's the sideburn, hairy-chested dude. That's Sebastian Shaw for you.
Not a typical supervillain look, but he pulls it off.
Yes, he does. Then we have, Pierce. Donald Pierce. Donald Pierce, if I remember correctly, this is the guy that's kind of like half cyborg.
He doesn't appear to even be a mutant. He's the only one, I think, that's not, but he's powerful due to his, cybernetic enhancements and whatnot.
The first time I remember reading about this guy was when he was head of the Reavers, or at least he was part of the Reavers. There was a storyline, and you may remember this. I could tell you one of the covers. Do you remember the cover where Wolverine is nailed to a cross, but instead of a cross, it's an X? That I remember.
Yeah, I know the cover. I just haven't read that story.
Okay, all right. So the Reavers, and I think it's Pierce, gets a hold of Wolverine, and they capture him. And this is right around the first appearance of Jubilee. She ends up rescuing Wolverine in this story arc. But anyway, the Reavers, they know that they can't kill Wolverine, but they decide to torture him by bloodletting him. And they nail him to this cross, and they stick him out in the desert. And he's just laying there. He can't get off this cross at all. And they come up to him. I remember Pierce. I think it's Pierce comes up to him every 4 or 5 hours and just cuts him and just bleeds him and then walks away. But
I guess this is to keep him weak.
Yeah, probably. It's been a while since I read it. I just remember.
Was it all of the mutants?
No, it was after that. I think it was right before the Siege Perilous, where they open up that big gym or whatever, and they get sucked in. Dude, we're talking, I think, I want to say maybe late 80s, early 90s. I'm fairly certain Jim Lee was on pencils at the time. If I had the, I wish I could figure out what issue it was.
Yeah, I remember that cover because it was I got into comics around 89, 90, and it was a back issue that I saw all the time at comic shops and conventions and stuff, but I never had it, and I never read that story.
Okay. Well, that's what I remember Pierce from. And I remember him, the Reavers were like these, they were like half human, half. I remember one guy had like tank legs. It's like So anyway, Donald Pierce, his abilities: cyborg body, superhuman strength and reflexes, bionic senses, mechanical genius, able to create numerous types of energy, technoforming, which I don't know if that happens in here or not, mechanical regeneration, advanced technology, incredibly wealthy, according to the wiki. So, and then we have Leland, which his name's Harry Leland, and I could have swore he didn't get out of this series. He didn't get out of this one alive, because we'll talk about that here in a second. But
that's a big fat guy, right?
Yeah, big fat guy. Harry Leland. His abilities is able to increase mass. So at one point, him and Wolverine are going at it, and he uses his power to like just basically put Wolverine on the floor, so because he can't get up. He increases his mass. But anyway, so there you go. There's the Hellfire Club. Mastermind. We find out Mastermind has been trying to become the head of the Hellfire Club and is trying to get Shaw out as lead. And Mastermind's plot with Jean Grey is to make her fall in love with him, turning her into the Black Queen. And in this issue, he succeeds. Jean Grey becomes the evil Black Queen and is at the whim of Wingard. When Jean strikes Scott down, the X-Men spring into action, battling the club. And by the end of the issue, all the X-Men are captured save one, and that is a nearly beaten Wolverine. That's kind of neat. Wolverine's on his own. He's the guy that we gotta kind of lay our hat on to try and rescue the X-Men. Now we get into issue 133. Wolverine tries to make his way back into the club, pretty much fighting all the club's lackeys. The crash test dummies just come at him in force, and he is taking them out one by one. Jason Wingard, Mastermind, faces off with Cyclops in a sword duel in the astral plane, and Cyclops ends up bested and gets like stabbed, and by the end of the issue he's laying on the ground and you believe he's apparently killed. So but we find out at the beginning of issue 134 that's not the case. He's actually still alive and his astral form was killed. Now Wolverine, he finally makes his way to try to rescue the X-Men, busts through the door carrying probably 3 or 4 lackeys on his back. During that duel between Mastermind and Cyclops, Black Queen was witnessing all of this, and watching Cyclops die on the astral plane actually breaks Mastermind's hold over her, and she ends up helping Cyclops free. And this is the issue where Wolverine practically kills Leland, he goes after Leland, and Leland, in a brilliant move, as Wolverine is coming down on top of him with the claws, uses his power so it increases his mass, and they don't show it, but he's getting impaled by Wolverine's claws. Yeah. Oh yeah, when we were last talking, me and you were talking, the Beast is hanging out with the Avengers. Yeah. And the Avengers are called because, hey, we got a Donnybrook down here at the Hellfire Club. We need some help. And the only guy on watch is Beast. And Beast makes a decision not to notify the rest of the Avengers. He takes off to go help the X-Men on his own.
Right. Not only that, we find out later he erases the tape.
Oh, does he? I don't remember that.
That's in like the last issue. He reveals that or whatever.
He goes back and erases the tape so the Avengers won't know.
Actually, I'm looking at the image now, and it's not pointed out, but you can see on the screen it says erase tape or whatever.
Oh, okay.
But they don't point it out in the issue until later. They point it out. He tells the X-Men that later. Okay.
I remember Jarvis going like, wait a second. Well, after Jarvis had found out some of this crazy stuff that was going on and finds that Beast has been gone and hasn't been on, because wasn't it President Nixon was talking to Jarvis or something?
It was President Carter. And they made sure to give him his terrible accent.
That's what it was. That's right. So, okay. Yeah. Jason Wingard tries to escape. The Black Queen is under the influence of Jason Wingard / Mastermind no more. So he's trying to make his escape, but Jean finds him, just like I was talking about. Jean has been kind of steadily crossing that line, and right here, she uses the Phoenix power to expose him to the universe, basically just like putting the expanse of the universe in his head, and pretty much leaves him catatonic. Now, while escaping in their jet, the X-Men think they're safe. They're getting out of Dodge, but the Phoenix has finally completely taken over Jean Grey. You just see this massive picture or this massive panel of in the jet where she goes,
"No longer am I the woman you knew. I am fire and life incarnate. Now and forever, I am Phoenix." Yeah. And then giant explosion that kills everyone.
Exactly. The plane explodes. And you're like, oh, hell, tune in next time. The plane basically explodes, and you're left to wonder what happens to the X-Men. So, and right at the end of that, next, Dark Phoenix. So, what do you think, man? Those 3 issues.
The Hellfire Club, they're powerful. You know, they're a worthy adversaries to the X-Men, but they're still kind of a smaller scale to what you normally would see in today's comics, it seems like. Phoenix, like, outside of when she's being controlled by Mastermind, like, she's changing the molecules in their clothes to change their costumes. She's shutting off Cyclops's
eyes.
Where he doesn't have to wear his visor or his glasses.
Oh, by the way, if I had to hear the words ruby quartz,
I know. It's
I get it.
Yeah. These comics were written to be like, if you've never read an X-Men comic, don't worry, we got you covered. We'll tell you everything. We can squeeze the panels in. Don't worry. But yeah, like it's showing how powerful she's getting, which is really great because it's setting her up as eventually she's going to turn and you're going to know how powerful this villain is. Not so much when the superheroes are this powerful that, like, you know, eventually Jean does come back. I mean, there have been a lot of Phoenix stories since then. But when I first got into comics in the early 90s, Jean was basically, she had come back by then, and she was basically regarded as the most powerful character in comics in some ways because she was a telekinetic and a telepath. She could take over your mind. She can, you know, lift anything she wants with her mind. She basically can use force fields, like, super duper powerful to the point where it's like, you know, the same problem that Superman has. Like,
yeah,
why, if she's this powerful, why do you need the rest of the X-Men? But that's all, you know, comes later. But it really works well when they're setting her up to be the villain that she turns into at the end of this storyline. I really noticed a lot in these issues too. Obviously, a lot of it has to do with the Hellfire Club and the way they dress. But man, there's some sexy ass clothes on these ladies.
Oh yeah.
Like even Warren's girlfriend, like she's falling out of her dress. You know, push-up bras on all the Hellfire. You know, on the Black Queen, the White Queen. Not to the extent. Yeah, it's not to the extent of like the bad girls in the '90s style, but like super risque. It seems like for the late '80s. I guess a lot of that was just the '70s, late '70s, early '80s fashion trends. It might have been influenced by that, but it was noticeable. Is all I'm saying.
Oh yeah, I hear you. I can't remember if it's in the next issue or next couple issues where, I mean, Jean Grey ends up naked in Scott's arms. And, you know, in front of her dad and stuff. And it's just, this is definitely, this isn't for kids. I mean, it's not over the top sexualized or anything like that, but this is one of those ones
who are getting into like more mature storytelling. And
I think that's what separated X-Men from a lot of what we were getting elsewhere in the 80s, specifically from the big two, I would assume, because
this is really practically the 70s. Like it's 1980, so it's before the Dark Knight and Watchmen and like the storylines that really brought comics into like stuff that adults were reading.
Yeah, I can remember some stuff, and I'll claim myself as a Spider-Man fan, but I can tell you that I've probably read maybe 15 to 20% of whatever was in Spider-Man in the 80s and less than that with whatever was in the 70s. But I do know of a few iconic storylines that occurred in Marvel Comics Spider-Man for sure. Like we had the non-code drug issues, if you remember those. And, we had
Osborn.
Yeah. Those things were touched on. But, it seems like that's what I like about this. It's kind of geared toward, just like I said, it's more mature level of reading. And in my opinion, as much of a hard time as we're giving Claremont for being wordy, I can tell you that it's still great writing in my opinion. It's still a great story.
Yeah, the only thing that really bothers me about like the wordiness is the constant reminding you of who the characters are. They're in Westchester. This is the home of the X-Men, yada, yada. Like, that stuff that they had to do in those days. That's the way comics were written. So I understand it. But as far as him, like, being really overly flowery descriptions of things, like, that stuff doesn't bother me. I think he's a talented writer. I think it's an engaging writing style. It just takes forever to read stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially like I noticed these issues, the page counts were shorter then, which I didn't really realize. For a long time, 22 pages was like the standard. And I've noticed in the last few years, Marvel and DC have gone back to scale it back to 20 pages is like the standard. But these were 17-page issues. So, and even with them only being 17 pages, they take forever to get through.
It takes you a while to get through it. Yeah, the special double-sized issue is 33 pages, and I'm like, wait a second. That's double-sized. I swear I've been reading 33 every time I've gone up to this issue.
Yeah, one other thing I forget which issue it is exactly. I think it's the middle one of these three. The iconic shot of Wolverine in the sewer looking up and popping his claws, like letting the reader know he's coming for the Hellfire Club in the next issue. It's a really, I was born in 1980, so I wouldn't have been reading this, but if I was like a 10 or 12-year-old reading this in 1980, that would really get me going and get me excited about the next issue. It's a kind of an iconic panel. Byrne is really good. I was not a big fan of John Byrne's art, like when I got into comics in the 90s, even into the late 90s. I thought his style was kind of old-fashioned. I didn't care for it. But I really like the art in these issues. There's a lot of attention to detail, a lot of big panels, like kind of widescreen panels showing a lot of, setting the scene, like of where everything's at in the room and everything. And I think the fight scenes are really well rendered as well.
Yeah, I really did not have a problem with the art here at all. There are some books where I'm just reading it and I'm like, this is a slog to get through, and the art doesn't do the rest of it any service. But I appreciated what Byrne brought to the table here for sure. I was just looking to see when Wolverine was created and where we're at here. So he's been around for about 6 years at this time. He was created in 5.5, November of 1974. So, Wolverine's about to become this badass.
Yeah. He was created as like a one-off in Hulk. I don't think he was even a mutant. And then Giant Size X-Men came shortly after that, and they were like, let's throw that Wolverine guy in here.
Yeah.
And we'll make him a mutant. And then he really took off in popularity after that.
Mm-hmm. You could see him kind of trying to gel with the team a little bit, but you can tell he's this, he is this ball of fury at some point. And what you're talking about there with that cover, X-Men 133. So on the front of that cover, it looks like Wolverine's in a warehouse, claws popped, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 crash test dummies coming after him. All of the X-Men have fallen before the might of the Hellfire Club, all except one. Wolverine lashes out. So, that was kind of his issue to kind of shine. That right there at the beginning of that issue, I'm looking at the first page, which is one page panel
over top.
Yeah, he's kind of like he's dripping with all that sewer whatever he was just in, and he's about ready to drop on these Hellfire Club lackeys. And so it was fun to kind of see him. He was the guy. He was the last one, the last hope that they had, and he's just hacking and slashing like
him taking on 3 or 4 Hellfire Club lackeys, that's nothing, but like they give him a good run. This is an era where like the heroes are powerful, but they're not over powerful. So he does take care of them, but it takes a few pages. Whereas now, if there were 20 henchmen, it would just show him running through, leaving limbs on the ground, slashing everybody without any trouble.
All right. Anything else on those 3?
The Cyclops death fake out.
Oh yeah.
A real like cock-a-doodle car moment, if you're familiar with the movie Misery. Yeah, where she's upset because she's watching the movie serials and the car explodes with the hero in it, and then she goes back to watch the next week, and he had ran out of the car before it went off the cliff.
Oh.
She's really mad because that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how this Cyclops thing is like, no, he was dead. You said he was dead. And then
Cyclops is
a month
dead.
later, oh, he's fine.
Yeah, first panel, isn't it? Like he's like, oh man, he's up to his knees. Oh man, thank goodness I'm not dead. Imagine, we sit here and we read this trade. It took me 5 days, and I spread it out pretty good. Imagine having to wait month to month for this, and then you see Cyclops is dead. You're like, oh man, no way. And then you get the next issue. I don't know. If I was a comic book reader,
more.
Yeah, they do. If I was a comic book reader though, and I saw that, I'm like, well, geez. Cyclops is fine. Come on.
Well, at this time, it may not have been like, maybe you did think he was dead. I don't know. They had killed Jean before and brought her back at this point, so So maybe it wasn't something people were surprised by,
Yeah.
One other thing I noticed I guess this is like the second page of this issue. Again, props to Byrne. He's got the 3 panels showing Colossus, Storm, Nightcrawler, and Cyclops in all the different versions. There's them as they really appear, and then there's a shot of them as the X-Men in their costumes, and then there's a shot of them as like the 1800s version that Jean is seeing in her head.
Yep.
And then we see the same thing with Jean and Mastermind. But as I was reading this, I was like, you're trying to catch everybody up with what all this is, but like it's confusing. Like, I know what's going on, and by the time I was done reading this page, I was confused.
Yeah, imagine somebody has just picked that issue up off the newsstand. Whew, would be a tough one.
And I was also found it a little annoying that Jean escaping Mastermind's control, there's no foreshadowing of that. Like, it's just like, no, when you killed Cyclops, you lost control of me. I just haven't shown it until now. And it was just kind of abrupt, and I thought it would have worked better if like there was a little hint that was coming or something like that.
Yeah, there's nothing. If you look at that first page that they open up with, the only thing that I could say is just the look on her face.
Yeah, but she has kind of a confused look on her face.
Yeah, that's it. But if I didn't put that together until after I read it the first time, and I was like, okay, I'm looking for clues as to maybe, but no, you're right. It's really abrupt. Like, oh, hey, I'm done. You don't control me anymore. Let me see what else they had in this issue. Ruby Quartz helmet. Ruby Quartz. How much does a freaking Ruby Quartz helmet cost? I'm sure.
How much does it weigh? Jeez. Where are they getting all this Ruby Quartz at?
Ruby Quartz. Is the Phoenix just evil itself?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily that, or if it's just that
maybe
much like Galactus, it's like a cosmic entity. It thinks it's so far above everyone else that it doesn't think it's doing anything wrong. I'm not sure. Or maybe it's because like bonding with a human, like her psyche can't handle it, and it's just kind of driven her mad.
Yeah,
I'm sure there are other storylines past this that deal, because I know the Phoenix stuff, it comes back again as recently as that Avengers vs. X-Men AVX from a few years ago, which was terrible. There was some Phoenix stuff in that, and it all kind of blends together. I can't really specifically remember any of the details to it, but
well, when I was reading this, I took this as Wingard getting in there and messing with her head.
Yeah,
that really kind of unlocked the door for this thing to kind of take over. When he turned her into the Black Queen, which that was another thing that kind of confused me. It's not like they really gave her much of a reason to be evil. When you saw her hanging out with Wingard, she was in love with him. And right. So the only thing I could think of is that when he turned her into the Black Queen, granted, this might have been stuff that was set up in earlier issues, because it really felt like this was something that's been in place way before this trade started. But
yeah.
Anyway, when he set her up as the Black Queen, maybe she was, when she jumped into that personality or whatever she was, it was evil as well. And maybe that had some kind of influence on it. But I didn't understand, completely as to why are we so evil? Why are we doing this? Why are we leaving a dude catatonic? Why are we exploding a jet with all our teammates in it?
Right.
That's kind of the way I took it, was that the Hellfire Club or Wingard messing with her head is just kind of unlocked this. And then all of a sudden, like I said, at the end of this issue, jet explodes and we are left to try and figure out what's going to happen to the rest of the X-Men. So any other things you want to talk about before we hop into the next three and finish this out?
I think I'm good with those.
All right, here we go. Issue 135, Dark Phoenix. The X-Men and their exploded jet fall to Central Park and battle Dark Phoenix, and they are no match. And when after she beats them, she takes to the stars. Now, it's interesting because when she takes off, it's neat that they put in there that the rest of the Marvel Universe kind of take notice. There's Spider-Man, his spider sense starts like going off big time. Doctor Strange takes notice. Oh, I can't remember
Fantastic Four.
Yep, Fantastic Four take notice. I mean, this is
even Silver Surfer, out in this far reaches of space, senses something.
Yeah, that's big time. That is big time. Beast finally shows up and he helps the X-Men kind of regroup. Meanwhile, the Phoenix goes out into space. After traveling for a little while, she ends up in the Shi'ar galaxy or Shi'ar space. And the Phoenix proceeds to absorb a star. consumes it, I believe is the word that they use. She consumes a star, causing it to go supernova, apparently. And this dooms a planet of 5 billion Dabari, I think is the name of the inhabitants of this planet. So she basically commits genocide. Now, unknowingly or knowingly, I don't know. She just eats the star up, gets all this energy, kills off the planet, and meanwhile, a Shi'ar battlecruiser's hanging out around there and is like, whoa, wait a second. They take notice and attack. No surprise, they are quickly destroyed. But not before reaching out to the magistrix of the Shi'ar Empire, Lilandra. She finds out about it, and she decides they need to take some action. Now, Lilandra is familiar with the Phoenix, so they know kind of the power level of what they have to deal with and the threat that the Phoenix poses to the rest of the galaxy. So she has to try and come up with a plan to take action. Now, after that run-in, Cyclops' rapport, so he has this psychic rapport with Jean Grey. Even though Jean Grey is kind of like not behind the steering wheel of her own body and the Phoenix is off doing things, he's still kind of... He could kind of feel or understand what Jean is doing, even across galaxies. Then, as they're sitting around basically licking their wounds, he gets this look on his face, and he's like, oh, crap, she's coming back. Jean Grey is coming back. The Phoenix is coming back to Earth, and she is still hungry. She's still hungry. One of the things that I just kind of put on here as a side note, after the big fight at the Hellfire Club, presidential candidate Kelly, what's his first name?
Robert Kelly, I think.
Robert Kelly. Okay, so he's coming out of the Hellfire Club. Sebastian Shaw grabs a hold of his ear. Is like, these mutants, not a good thing. Maybe you ought to think about maybe granting us a little bit of funding. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? And he's like, I'm talking about Sentinels. I was like, oh, now right there is a great example of. I remember Jordan talking about this when we were talking about blood ties. A great example of them just putting seeds in for something that's going to probably come way down the road. All right, 136. So the Shi'ar, Lilandra, come up with a plan to try and destroy the Phoenix, which basically means they've got to get a hold of Jean Grey in order to do this. Phoenix makes her way back to Earth and decides to go pay a visit to her family. The Phoenix is kind of controlling her. It's definitely there, but she goes back and she's talking to her family as if she's Jean Grey. She's definitely in her own head thinking as Jean Grey. And one of the things that happens is that as her family are like, hey, we haven't seen you in forever. It's her mom, her dad, and her sister. She starts realizing their mind is basically laid bare. She can read all of their thoughts.
But you can't help it. She can't stop.
No.
She can't stop herself from hearing what they're thinking.
Exactly. She can see that they fear her, and that upsets Phoenix again. To kind of support what you were saying about how she feels the Phoenix is above all that. She kind of says a few things that don't go over so well with her dad. And she, I think, ends up leaving. She doesn't do anything. She kind of shows her power, and then she's like, I'm out of here. As she gets outside of the house, the X-Men show up and confront her. And there's a point where Wolverine has her and almost kills her. I mean, he's got his claws popped. He's going to bury his claws into her and try and end this. She turns back into Jean for just a split second. Now, folks, Wolverine loves Jean Grey.
Yeah.
He's been in love with her, I don't know for how long, but I know that there's been, even in the films, it's been touched on about how much he loved Jean. Here is no different, even though I think at first he believes that Phoenix has taken her over. There's no going back. But then when she switches back to Jean and Jean's like, please, kill me, he can't do it. And then Phoenix immediately takes back over and is able to avoid getting killed. And now when she gets her bearings back, she freezes all the X-Men, but then Xavier shows up. Warren Worthington III, Angel, had flown Professor Xavier in here, and he enters the battle. Battles are psychically. There's a big, I'm sure there's some kind of huge battle on the astral plane, whatever.
Right.
And apparently he bests the Phoenix, and the Phoenix is gone, and Jean is back. But right at the end of that issue, they are immediately transported, just like that, onto one of the Shi'ar ships in front of Magistrix Lilandra. Apparently, Jean Grey is going to pay for all her sins and potentially be put on trial. So that ends issue 136. Let's get into our final issue, X-Men 137. Special double-sized issue. Phoenix must die. All right, so this cover, my goodness, it's Scott and Jean arm in arm. their clothes are tattered, and they're just unleashing all their power. So what could possibly lead us to this event? And Earth is in the background. Wait a second. So yes, we have a real neat double-page spread of the X-Men and their new surroundings on the Shi'ar vessel as they're trying to figure things out. Oh yeah, and by the way, there's the Watcher.
I wonder how often the Watcher had shown up. I know he showed up in Fantastic Four in the classic Galactus story. I don't think any of the what ifs had really. Maybe there had been a what if series by this time, but I wonder how common it was to see the Watcher pop up in events back then.
That's a good question. Let me look here. I want to see when the what if series started. Volume 1. Oh, yeah. Publication date. Volume 1, 1977 to 1984. Volume 2 is the one I'm more familiar with. Went from 1989 to 1998. So, yeah. So, okay. Well, the Watcher was... Have you ever seen what the Watcher looked like? Like in the beginning, he definitely does not look like he does on this. He looks way goofier back a few years back before this. But anyway, all right. So yeah, the Watcher's here. So
he
obviously that's
pudgy a big in his early appearances, doesn't he?
Oh, what's that?
He looks kind of pudgy in his early appearances, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. He definitely doesn't have the big bulbous head. I remember it was just more like
I'm not interested then.
He looked like Ralph the Garbage Man just after getting a shower or something. It was just like, well, okay. But anyway, yeah, so, hey, if the Watcher's here, it's probably a big event. So, yeah, the Shi'ar plan to kill Phoenix. They also explain to the X-Men what she did. In order to avoid this, Professor Xavier, who, by the way, former, well, I think still lover of Lilandra, star-crossed lovers, if you will, he challenges them to a duel of honor. So in order to try and save Phoenix's life, Professor X says, okay, there's one thing that I can get away with here to try and stop this, and that's to challenge the Shi'ar Empress to a duel of honor. Now, that doesn't mean Professor Xavier and Alondra are going to fight. There's going to be two teams that will battle each other. And not only that, but the Phoenix is such a threat that the Kree and the Skrulls are on the same team here practically. I mean, they're both there, and they're backing up Lilandra because, obviously they don't want this to happen to either one of their planets. As the duel of honor will be honored, I guess is the best word, as it will occur, they give the X-Men some time to kind of rest, regroup, and get ready for this thing. And we have a bit of a montage, I guess you would say, of what each X-Man is kind of thinking about leading up to this, and it's wordy, but again, we've got to get into the minds of our characters here and what they're about to encounter. Claremont knows that by the end of this issue, what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So he's giving. It seems like all of the characters a little bit of time to reflect on how they got there. The worry that they have of the upcoming battle, which is I can respect that in a sense. Sometimes I was like, oh, is this filler? I don't know. I mean, it feels like it's something that does have to be said. So we get to when the duel occurs. Now, the duel occurs on what they call the blue area of the moon. It's pretty much the X-Men versus the Imperial Guard. I did not write down the Imperial Guards, all the names of the Imperial Guard. I know there was one guy named Earthquake, but the big dude is always the Gladiator.
He's Superman, basically.
Yeah, it's very close to Superman. Now, the thing is that him and Colossus...
Awesome.
Yes, sir. Him and Colossus go at it, which was probably the coolest battle of all of the ones we had here.
Colossus giving a pretty good account of himself in that fight.
There's one point which I thought was hilarious, and it's when Wolverine just kind of falls through a wall. And he's like, whoa, what the hell? And he ends up in the Watcher's house. The Watcher's like, hey, check this out. He's like, how about you stay out of here, or here's what I can do to you. And like tosses Wolverine over like 15 eras of history and then back out the wall. Wolverine, I think his reaction was, that's kind of a funny way of telling somebody not to trespass because I guess Watcher didn't want him in there. So my next note was about Colossus versus the Gladiator. Like you said, that was a hell of a battle, and it was so neat because they're battling and stuff's falling down around them until they're completely buried, and then one guy gets up, and sure enough, it's Gladiator. So, and then at the end of this is Jean and Scott versus them all, just like we see on the cover. These two are battling. I mean, Phoenix is battling for her life here. Obviously, Scott in love with Jean and is going to do anything to protect her, but So, again, Jean supposedly was back, but lo and behold, here comes the Phoenix back again. We got problems. And now the X-Men have to kind of focus their attack. Instead of the Imperial Guard, they have to focus their attack on Jean Grey because the Phoenix has had enough. They have to attack the Phoenix. And there's one point where I didn't see this coming. They do the reverse fastball special.
Yeah, that was pretty sweet.
I love that, man. So Wolverine is like, hey, grabs Colossus. I was like, wait a second, what is he doing here? I forgot that we have decreased gravity on the moon, and he throws Colossus at Phoenix, and Colossus like nails Phoenix in the face and rocks her and brings her back for just a brief second, and she's again begging the X-Men to kill her. No one will do it. No one's going to step up and do it. So what she does is she finds a way to get herself killed. There's apparently like this ancient gun that's sitting there. It's been sitting there for a while. She knew about it. She walks in front of it, and it vaporizes her, and she's dead, and Cyclops is just left there to weep by her ashes. And that's kind of where we leave things until the Watcher shows up and gives us a little bit of speech where he's talking to this recorder guy, which, by the way, I've never seen the recorder guy like in an actual comic up until now. But do you remember how we were talking Earth X?
Yeah.
He's part of Earth X, isn't he? Or does he is the Machine Man Machine Man take over like his position?
I believe it's Machine Man.
Yeah. I mean, we got to talk about that sometime. That is a great series.
Yeah, it is. That image of the Watcher on the big screen when Wolverine is in his house,
Yeah.
That is very much what the Watcher in Earth X looks like. I think it might even only be in Earth X Zero when he kind of gives Machine Man the task of like recording the events. Mm. But that was a cool, like, reverse reference, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's where he took the inspiration for that from this issue.
I had no idea who this person was. I've never seen
the reporter. I only think I've read there were some Thor issues in the Dan Jurgens, John Romita Jr. run. Took place after Heroes Reborn once they came back.
Mm-hmm.
Really good Thor run. I've been meaning to reread it for a while because I loved it when I was younger. He appears in some issues where Thor battled Thanos. Really good storyline, like a 4 or 6 issue storyline. But that I think is the only appearance of the recorder I'm aware of besides this one that I've actually read.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. So like I said, Cyclops is kind of like laying by her ashes and he's weeping, and the recorder's kind of asking, the Watcher, like, hey, what? He's trying to figure out why she did this. Why would Jean kill herself? The Watcher gives obviously a Claremont inspired speech. It's a long speech.
Classic Claremont.
It's a long speech. But in the end, there's specifically at the end, he says this. He says, Jean Grey could have lived to become a god, but it was more important for her to die a human. I've noticed here, especially the Kree Skrull War, going back to the 70s, one of the things that they were talking about in that was, it seemed like the people outside of Earth were completely afraid of the drive of humanity. Mm-hmm. And then, so there's a lot of, granted, it's not too in depth, but there's a lot of commentary there about how humans will continue to drive to do what they can do. So there's a commentary on humanity there. There's a commentary on humanity here as well. And this big battle that results in the death of one of the core X-Men. Jean Grey's been around since X-Men 1, right?
Right.
Yeah. So this is a big thing. Well, here it looks like she is absolutely vaporized. There's nothing.
The ashes.
Yeah, there's nothing left. So, this feels like a pretty final thing for Jean Grey and Phoenix here. But anyway, so like I was saying, Watcher steps in here, and again, he's educating us on the value of self-sacrifice. Interesting way to end it. Like I said, we didn't get into 138. I didn't read it. You didn't read it. But if you guys, anybody out there who's seen the cover, it's Cyclops. He's got his stick with his handkerchief on it. No, that's not really what. he's got his duffel bag behind him, and he's walking away. And he's not planning on being an X-Man anymore. Last 3 issues, final thoughts. However you want to do it, man. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I've got a few notes from the final 3 issues. Speaking of the original team, they almost got them all back together. As once Beast and Angel appeared, I was kind of thinking, well, when's Bobby going to show up? Because
are they
bringing them all back? Because it seemed like they were bringing them all back to send off Jean, you know, so that all the original 5 and Professor X would all be there when Jean died. But Bobby never shows up. They never even reference him. I'm not sure what he was doing.
That's what I was going to ask. I'm curious as to what he was doing then. I'm going to take
maybe he was busy with the champions.
You know what? It's a very good possibility. Let me look here real quick. He says, during his original stint with the X-Men, Drake pursues a relationship with Lorna Dane. Although the relationship doesn't last, Iceman is among the original X-Men captured by Krakoa, leading to a new incarnation of X-Men. Well, we talked about that, of which he is not a member. With most of the original team, he quits the X-Men. Iceman moves to the American West Coast to attend UCLA and becomes a founding member of the Champions of Los Angeles. So, all right, go ahead, man.
Yeah, that's I was expecting that, and he never popped up. But you know, this 7 issues, basically 3 issue, you know, epic, and it's just all self-contained within the X-Men, whereas you know, most galactic level threats in the time since then, it becomes like an Avengers book, you know, an Avengers crossover. You know, you're going to throw in Doctor Strange, you're going to have all these different characters, whereas in this you get a mention of those characters reacting to Phoenix, you know, showing up, but it's just an X-Men book. The scene where Jean, you know, consumes the star and the planet explodes, I mean, that's a really, really impressive, just the artwork on that page is really impressive. Again, I like pretty much the entire series, you know, as far as Burns' work, but that page really stood out as something that I really liked.
Could you imagine if this storyline took place in the 90s? How far-reaching it would have been throughout the Marvel Universe. Yeah, just like you said, we only get that little bit, and it's in the X-Men book. It's like, man, this should have been like all over. This should have been a multi-title crossover of some sort.
That stuff didn't really happen back then. It was really rare. There were crossovers and guest appearances and stuff, but like a big epic crossover, like, I mean, this was pre-Secret Wars, I'm pretty sure. That came in like 81 or 82, I think. But also the Shi'ar battle cruiser that like attacks Jean, it's like, what are you thinking? Like,
you just watched
ate a star.
Yeah, there's
like, why would you think you have any shot? And when they summon Lilandra to let her know what's going on, it looks like there's a picture of Charles on that globe, like in her bedroom, which would make sense because they have a relationship, you know, from previous issues. But that was a nice touch, I thought.
Yeah.
The scene at Jean's parents' house when they're trying to calm her down, and before Professor X shows up, it's, again, this is 1980, so it's a few years past The Exorcist, and it's in an era when like the Satanic Panic stuff was really like real. So there's a lot of like Exorcist type. They even reference pea soup.
Oh my gosh!
They talk about the pea soup type mist or something like that. So I think that was probably an influence, which I thought was cool.
Hey, just to let you know, I didn't know if you knew this or not, but Cyclops cannot open his eyes until he puts on his special ruby quartz glasses.
He needs ruby quartz visor or glasses to protect those.
Oh, nice.
A curse.
Just in case you didn't know.
But yeah, the Guardian stuff was cool. There's even a moment, like, I don't know if it was established that, like, I assume this is in his first appearance and that they kind of established in his earlier appearance, like, yeah, this is our Superman. We want a Superman type character, so this is him. And the moment where Colossus, like, hits him over the head with that giant stone pillar, he's striking a Superman hands on the hip pose.
Exactly.
Like, really hammering it home. It's very cool. I like that.
Exactly.
And he's not even jarred at all by
not a flinch. Not a flinch at all. Gladiator, first appearance, X-Men 107. Oh, that was hot.
That would have been the previous Jean, or when she got the Phoenix, I guess.
Yep, Phoenix Saga. So yeah, interesting. Okay, created by Chris Claremont.
And there's a lot of good stuff with Gladiator since, like, I read several cool Gladiator stories or stories with Gladiator appearing. So I kind of like that character.
So he did apparently he showed up in Star Trek X-Men. I don't know if you've ever read that.
I've never read that. I've been curious to read it because Silvestri does the art on it, but I've never read it.
He physically battles the USS Enterprise itself.
Wow. I mean, shouldn't he just be able to destroy it pretty easily?
Right through it. Captain Marvel it all the way. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Again, kind of like with the breaking Mastermind's control, this whole thing with Jean's plan of, like, of her, basically her suicide plan, like comes completely out of nowhere. And then we have 3 panels of like exposition from Cyclops explaining, what happened. And it's like, shouldn't that have been kind of set up beforehand? Like, it just seems kind of clumsily, especially as the finale. It's like the last page, basically, besides the Watcher's speech at the end. So that was kind of disappointing. I mean, it was a cool way to end it, as far as like Jean sacrificing herself with using the weapon and whatnot. But like, it just completely comes out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man, what's to say about Charles Xavier? Like, would you say that he beat the Phoenix, or would you say like the Phoenix is like, okay, I'm out for right now, I'm coming back?
Yeah, I would say he won a battle, but the war wasn't over.
Yeah.
And once, like, the reason the Phoenix comes back is because Jean, and this happens off panel, another thing that is explained after the fact.
Okay, that's where I was going to go. It's like, how does this happen?
Yeah, she sees Cyclops, defeated, and I guess she thinks he's about to die, and that's what maybe she calls the Phoenix. It doesn't specify that she does it, but maybe because he's about to die, she calls the Phoenix back. Or maybe, I forget exactly how it's worded, but basically seeing Scott in peril brought the Phoenix back, and the Phoenix took control of her again.
Crazy.
As far as like among the great X-Men crossovers that I've read, I haven't read them all, but I've read several. It ranks pretty high. There is the issue of the kind of dated storytelling. That stuff doesn't really bother me that much. I really liked the art even more than I thought that I would, going back to it. A lot of iconic moments, the Wolverine, in the sewer shot, the I Am Phoenix moment when she blows up the jet, and then the sacrifice. A lot of big stuff. And the Hellfire Club fight. This is the first appearance of the Hellfire Club, first appearance of Dazzler and Shadowcat, especially Shadowcat becomes a big deal later. It's kind of essential if you're an X-Men fan.
My goodness, how many times has the Phoenix been referenced since this point? The Phoenix Force, I never read AVX, but I read Secret Wars. Mm-hmm. If I remember correctly, the Phoenix Force shows up there and is unfortunately no match for Doctor Doom. But there is plenty of times where the Phoenix is coming back. Just as I was talking about the crossover between the X-Men and Teen Titans, the big bads of that are Dark Phoenix and Darkseid.
Right. Yeah, that's one I really would like to read, but I've thumbed through a copy of it a few times. The comic shop I work at, sometimes they've usually got a copy. I don't know if they have one right now, but I've thumbed through it several times, but I've never actually sat down and read it.
It was one of the first ever company crossovers I bought. I bought it in, I want to say it was either late 80s or very early 90s. I remember it sitting on the shelf. This comic book store has been gone forever. And I remember seeing it sit on the shelf, and I'm pretty sure it had a $5 price tag on it. And I was like, oh man, there's no way I'm going to be able to talk Mom and let me buy this. Somehow talk Mom into let me buy it. And it's been one of my cherished treasures ever since. Cause I think that I know it wasn't one of the first Marvel DC crossovers, because I've read other ones. Marvel,
yes. Superman, Spider-Man was the first one, and then Hulk, Batman.
Yeah.
I think the next one was probably the Titans X-Men one.
Okay. So anyway, it's been a while since I read it too. So maybe one of these days, if we get a chance, if it comes up, cover it on here. So anyway, this is an iconic storyline. This if you can get your hands on this trade, it is a piece of X-Men history, and I can guarantee you are going to hear the word Phoenix or Dark Phoenix again at some point in the Marvel storylines. So why not get your hands on one of the bigger and more early appearances of the Dark Phoenix? So I had a good time talking about it, man. I think, I think we'll wrap things up here. So all right. Well, I've got the schedule in front of me. Let me hit your plugs first. So, sir, you have the floor, Chris Armstrong. Let's hear what you got going on.
Not a whole lot. I've got a fairly recent piece up on the UnspokenDecade.com. My top 10 moments from the Infinity Gauntlet. Outside of that, if you're a 90s comic fan, you need to check out the UnspokenDecade.com anyway. Check out their Facebook page. It's updated pretty frequently with awesome covers from the 90s. It's basically a 90s comic fan site, so check that out. My Twitter is @BrodyMan34. You can follow me on there as well.
All right, very good. Well, like I said, Mark Radlich is not here to do the schedule, so I'll run down the week that this is airing, what we have in store for you. So right here, you just heard the Dark Phoenix Saga. That is going to be followed by, on the 11th, Damn You Hollywood's take on Dark Phoenix. So I'm sure that's going to be Mark Radulich and Robert Winfrey, possibly anybody else who wants to jump in on that. Then we have me and Mark Radulich. Oh, geez. So I'll do a little bit of an explanation as to what in the world this is. Metal Hammer of Doom. We're going to be talking a band called Oakley Dokley, okay?
Oh, wow.
Here's the thing. We covered these guys, their last album that they did. So obviously it is a Ned Flanders inspired band. Each member is some take on the character Ned Flanders from The Simpsons. Now, I know about The Simpsons. I'm definitely not a uber fan like some people that I know.
Me.
But anyway, okay, all right. So, have you ever heard these guys before?
I've never heard their music. I see them pop up on Facebook a lot in like different groups. And my take is usually like, that's a great idea, but I'll bet the music is terrible. But that's because I don't like metal, for one thing.
Yeah, the first album was a little rough.
I mean, they may be great. I don't know. That's just my instinct is just like, I'll bet that's a great gimmick for about 3 minutes, and then the music's probably not my cup of tea, so I wouldn't care about it. But they look, it's a neat look. It is a nice idea,
Well, here.
More power to them.
Let me read you a little something here. So, the first album is called, this came out November 11th, 2016. It's called Howdly Doodly, all right? The second album that we're going to be talking on Wednesday is called Howdly Toodly. So I want to read you some of the, I'll read you the track listing off of Howdly Doodly. Track number 1, White Wine Spritzer. Okay. Number 2 is Flander Doodles. Number 3 is Vegetables. Number 4 is Nothing at All. Number 5, can you see where they're getting this from? Yeah. Number 5 is You're a Jerk. Number 6 is Sacrifice. Number 7 is Press Destruct Button. Number 8 is More Animal Than Flan. Number 9 is They Warned Me. Number 10 is Donut Hell. Number 11 was Panic Room, which I remember being one of my favorites off this album. Number 12 was Godspeed Little Doodle. And then number 13 was All That Is Left.
All right.
Yeah, buddy. All right, so Howdly Toodly, that's coming up there this coming Wednesday on the Metal Hammer of Doom. And then, we talked about it earlier, On Trial, Mark Radulich, Sean Comer, we'll be talking X-Men 3, The Last Stand. So I'm curious as to whether Mark has to defend Godzilla 1998 the week before. So Mark usually reaches into the trash can and says, I will defend this. So that's probably what will happen here.
I like the 98 Godzilla. I fully admit it's not any good. But I've got a soft spot for that movie.
Ladies and gentlemen, go give the Radulich and Broadcasting Network Facebook page a like. I'll throw in the old can plugs in here later. I don't think I have anything. Yeah, next week's going to be Gotham Central, which I've never read. What is this? Is this like is it like a police procedural kind of? Yeah,
basically it's about the Gotham police force. And I've read the first trade a couple times, and I've got I think there are 5 trades total. I forget how many issues the series ran, but I've never actually finished reading the whole thing. So this is a great chance for me to reread the first one and just power through the rest of them because I've always wanted to finish it. It's Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka, who are like 2 of my favorite comic writers, especially doing like crime stuff.
Yeah, Brubaker I recognize, and Rucka as well. All right, well, hey, Chris Armstrong, thank you again, sir.
Appreciate you having me.
Greatly appreciate it. All right, well, we will talk to you guys later. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Radulich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.
Get to Old Navy's Best of Summer sale now for the best summer styles at the best prices. Get $2 flip-flops, $4 tanks, $6 tees, and $8 dresses and shorts for the whole family. Summer styles are just $2, $4, $6, and $8. $2 flip-flops, $4 tanks, $6 tees, and $8 dresses and shorts. Can't wait to wear it? Buy online and pick up in-store for free. Ends soon at Old Navy and OldNavy.com. Valid 6/10 to 6/18. Excludes gift cards. Today only and 2-day only deals. Store clearance, register lane items, and jewelry. This Saturday only, Old Navy's famous flip-flops are $1. Plus, get free flip-flops when you spend $24 or more in-store or online. Saturday only at Old Navy and OldNavy.com. Valid 6/15, solid color only, limit 10 in stores, 5 online, free offer valid before noon PST.